Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to build a blueprint for success. We'll be using some key ideas from Applied Behavior Analysis, or ABA. Now, this is a scientific way to look at behavior, and we're going to break it all down so you can use these core principles to structure pretty much any session for success.
So, have you ever felt like a daily routine is just, well, more chaotic than calm? Whether it's getting ready in the morning or trying to tackle homework, when there's no real structure, it can just feel totally overwhelming, right? For everyone.
Well, the answer really lies in creating a blueprint for that success. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. How a really well-structured session can create a predictable world, a world where a person can just thrive.
All right, so let's get right into it. Why is structure so powerful? I mean, what is actually happening inside the brain that makes it work so well?
Okay, so here's the absolute core of it. When a person knows what to expect, they feel safe. They feel secure. And that feeling of security, it actually frees up their brain. So instead of spending all that energy worrying about what's coming next, they can actually focus on learning.
And this quote just nails it perfectly. Think about it like this. A routine is kind of like forging a path in the woods. The first few times, it's tough, right? You're pushing through branches, but the more you walk it, that path gets clearer and easier to follow, until eventually it becomes the brain's go-to default route. And that brings us to what is probably the single most important idea for building any new routine. Seriously, this is the engine that's going to power our entire blueprint. See, at its core, the brain is always, and I mean always, doing a quick cost-benefit analysis. It's constantly weighing how much effort will this take versus what's the reward I'm going to get. And believe it or not, this super simple calculation drives almost everything we do. So, for any new behavior to stick, that scale has got to tip in one direction. The reward has to feel way more powerful than the effort you're asking for. If the effort feels like a solid 8 out of 10, that reward better feel like a 9 or 10, or even more. And this is the crucial part. This whole scale thing gives us two levers we can pull. If you just don't have a big enough, powerful enough reward to offer, well, then you have to find a way to make the task easier. You've got to lower the effort. Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we lower the effort and make the whole structure crystal clear? Well, let's open up our toolkit because we've got two main tools we're going to work with. First up, we've got something called task analysis. And really, it's just a fancy way of saying we're going to break a big, high-effort goal down into a bunch of smaller, way more manageable steps. Take brushing teeth, for example. That's not really one single task, is it? It's a whole sequence of smaller actions. You'd never try to teach it all in one go. You'd break it down just like this, and maybe even teach one tiny step at a time if you need to. What this does is create something called a behavior chain. It's pretty cool, actually. Over time, finishing step 1 just becomes the natural signal to start step 2, and then step 2 cues step 3, and on it goes. Each step just automatically triggers the next one. All right, our second tool is all about visual supports. These are things that make the structure totally visible. They help a person literally see and understand what's expected, so you don't have to constantly be giving verbal instructions, which, let's be honest, can get pretty stressful for everybody.
Now, this is super important. The type of support you use is not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. It absolutely has to be tailored to that person's specific skills. A picture schedule might be perfect for one individual, but someone else might get a huge sense of accomplishment from checking items off a list.
Okay, so we've got our tools, right? Task analysis and visual supports. Now let's talk about putting them to work. How do we use them to get that all-important effort versus reward scale balanced just right? And here's a key thing to remember about that reward. A reward completely loses its power if it's something the person can get for free anytime they want. To really work, the reward, we call it a reinforcer, it has to be special. It's got to be reserved only for this task. That's the secret sauce that unlocks motivation. And please remember this, structure is meant to be a framework, not a cage. The absolute best sessions are flexible. If someone is just having a tough day, you adjust the plan. The real goal here is progress, not perfection. You have to balance that predictability with just being responsive and human. So, what does all this actually look like in practice? Let's see how all these pieces come together in the real world. Okay, here's a great example of how you can chain these tasks together. What could be a really overwhelming afternoon routine is now broken down into 4 clear steps. And check this out. See how a small, immediate reward follows each and every task? That keeps the motivation going, and it all builds toward a much bigger reward at the very end.
And this principle works everywhere, even in telehealth sessions. Something as simple as emailing the schedule to the family ahead of time. Make sure that the practitioner and the family are on the same team, a united front. It just cuts down on stress and makes the whole session so much more effective, all because everyone knows the plan.
And really, that's the biggest takeaway here. Structure isn't about control or being rigid. It's about creating a predictable world. When you provide that clear blueprint, you're reducing anxiety, you're empowering people, and you're giving them the confidence and the independence to succeed on their own terms.
So I want you to think about this. What is one small routine that you could build a blueprint for this week? By applying this simple idea, balancing effort and reward, breaking down the task, and making the plan visible, what challenge could that help you solve? It could honestly transform the way you approach learning and daily life.